this hotshot A&R guy. I won't say names, but he came to my house and was very complimentary, and I played him AB3. And at that time, we had no record deal. We had just bought out of Universal Records. And the guy comes in, I play him the record. He's like, he's listening to it. He's like, yeah, cool, but he doesn't hear a single yet. And then we had play him Ghost of Days Gone By. And he's like, getting real excited. Like this is where he's going to make his money. And then all of a sudden the bridge happens and the storm clouds and the song comes in and it changes from this pop sensibility to this more menacing thing. And he's like, is there a way where it couldn't do this in the song?
Hey guys, Jonathan Graham here for Thinking About Guitar. My guests today are arguably the best 1-2 punch in rock music today. It's Mr. Mark Tremonti and Mr. Myles Kennedy. How are you guys doing today?
Good, yourself?
Yeah, now that I got that sentence out, we just tried it like 6 times and I finally got there. Since you guys launched Alter Bridge back in 2004, it's just gone from strength to strength. You're on album number 8. It's the self-titled album. I don't want to be this guy that goes on about the title, but I don't think that's by chance that you're calling it that. So, Mark, from your perspective, why is this the definitive Alter Bridge record?
I think it encapsulates everything we've done from the past and puts it into one little, if you're a first-time Alter Bridge listener, this is kind of a good example of what the band's all about after all these years. But we didn't go into this record thinking along the lines of we're going to do a self-titled record, but somebody had brought it up, what do you guys want to name the record? And the self-titled thing came up and everybody immediately was like, it makes sense. We're all proud of this record. It represents what the band's really about. And along with the self-titled, we did a very streamlined, easy artwork package. So it's, hopefully it also says this is more about the music than it is the presentation. We've never been, our music videos and the way we dress, everything hasn't been the greatest over the years. So we concentrate on the music.
We're not snappy dressers. It's tricky because with each record, you want to evolve somehow, right? But what this record turned out to be, at least to my ears, was the kind of the essence of the band, which has been there since the beginning, which is based on kind of the heavier riff. And a certain melodic sense with a certain depth to the lyrics. And at times we kind of explore different textures and arrangement approaches and things to kind of help define each record. But with this record, we kind of leaned into that essence, instead of shifting right or to the left, it's like kind of leaned right down the middle to the theme that's been there from the beginning. So it felt appropriate to call it just Alter Bridge for that reason.
Yeah.
We're not one of these bands, though we do take little detours here and there. We're I think more akin in the sense, that you take a band like AC/DC, which you kind of know what you're going to get there, and I feel like with this band, with the fans that like what we do, we don't want to alienate them. So we're never going to come out with a record that's there's no guitars, it's all just keyboards,
Yeah.
So, with
Never say never, Myles.
Never say never. It's true. Record number 9, it could be our tribute to Depeche Mode.
We'll be on Keyboard Interactive Magazine.
Well, talking about that, because you're at a stage now where, you've been that way, I guess, from the start. You only really put out music when you feel you've got something to say. Would you ever be tempted to follow a trend, or is that just completely against what you guys are all about? Because obviously you're always picking up new influences, from new music that's coming out to films, and different things can inspire. But there must be temptation sometimes from labels to push you in certain directions. And how do you cope with that?
We've always pushed back if there was any kind of outside influence to push us in a direction we don't want to be in, and that we're lucky enough where there hasn't really been that. And I think very early in my career, there was one gentleman who came in and suggested something, and we all just kind of turned and laughed at him. And
was that in this band?
No, it was my first band, Creed, and we kind of looked at him. We're like, "Why don't you play us one of your songs?" And then he played us one of his songs, and we all just kind of laughed, like, "All right, you stay in your lane. We're going to do what we do."
So was this a songwriter or a producer, or
this was an A&R?
On the first record?
Either the first or the second. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think it was the second record. It's the first record we did in by ourselves in Tallahassee, Florida. Yeah. But with Alter Bridge, we've had one person. When I was I was in Orlando playing the record. I don't know if you were there. I think it was just me and him. But there was this hot shot A&R guy. I won't say names, but he came to my house and was very complimentary. And I played him AB3. And at that time, we had no record deal. We had just bought out of Universal Records. And the guy comes in. I play him the record. He's like, he's listening to it. He's like, yeah, cool, but he doesn't hear a single yet. And then we had play him Ghost of Days Gone By. And he's like, getting real excited. Like this is where he's going to make his money. And then all of a sudden the bridge happens and the storm clouds and the song comes in and it changes from this pop sensibility to this more menacing thing. And he's like, is there a way where it couldn't do this in the song? And that's when I knew he wasn't right for the record label wasn't right for the band. Because we don't want to ever write for radio, ever write for a trend. The only way we would ever write around a trend is if that trend made us very inspired naturally,
Yeah.
But
got to feel authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, with the new record, that's exactly how it feels. And because you guys are so busy with your other projects as well, with your solo music and what you're doing with Creed, and your solo music as well, which just keeps getting heavier and heavier every album, it definitely feels like, I mean, it's not just you two guys in the band, Scott and Brian play a big part in that sonic wall as well, but it does feel like your collective work is coming together to create this super heavy, super expressive collection of 12 songs. I'm assuming, Myles, you notice that as well.
We are very lucky that we get to explore other musical avenues. Mm-hmm. And one could argue, well, by doing that, how is that going to hinder when you come back to this project? And I feel like it makes it so you can get that stuff off your chest. Like for me, with the things I've done in the solo realm, I can kind of get that out of my system. I love it. And then I come back to this. I know what this is about. I know what the set of colors that we typically paint with here. It's kind of reinvigorates me, and it makes that whole approach fresh, so that we can come up with another. We can go to the canvas and paint something new. But I feel like it's helped both of us. Mm-hmm. I think that having other outlets is kind of crucial, especially when you have two guys who love to create as much as we do. I can't imagine what it would be like to only be able to make and release a record once every 3 years, just one record.
With one band.
With one band. That's like, in essence, Mark and I are like musical swingers.
It's almost like if we were to write, if somebody was interested in the way we do what we do, I think the hint or the advice we would probably give is step out of your box and do other projects. Mm-hmm. It's only going to strengthen you as a whole and make you come back to your main focus and be that much more well-rounded with it. And when you do that, you're also playing with other musicians. I think you can get too possessive about a single band. You get too possessive with your bandmates. Like, how dare you go sing with Slash? How dare you go?
I heard that you said that.
Yeah. No, when all the projects have come up, since this is not our first band, we've all been so supportive of one another because it only makes things better. Higher water raises all ships. So Myles playing with Slash and his solo project and all that, you're going to get different people becoming aware of the other bands, and you're going to bring a new skill set. So I think it's a very healthy thing to do. It's not. I don't think it's a thing that a lot of people do. I said do. But
did you have to sort of twist his arm a little bit to sing a bit more on this record?
Not really. I think he's really, he loves to sing. I think, which is great.
Your voices work so well together.
It seems to be. I remember our manager at the time, back when we first started 20 years ago, we'd sit around the little kitchen nook at his house and put together tunes, and I think he commented on just kind of the balance of the vocals and how it worked, because not all voices work well together. So that's always been nice. But fortunately, he's really leaning into being a singer, which he should, and so there's no arm twisting necessary. I'm like, hey man, I think this song would be better if you sang it. Great. All right, put me in, coach. I'm ready to play.
And that's the thing. It sounds like you're both inspiring each other in that way. There must be tonalities in Myles' voice that you're blending towards when you're hearing it and trying to mix with it. Same thing happening with your guitar playing.
Yeah, it's the same exact dynamic where he I think came to realize that guitar playing, I started as a guitar player. I
course.
love playing
Great
guitar.
player.
And it's like it's one of those things where, you know, it was, hey Miles, do you want to play a solo here? Yes, I do. It's never like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do. You know, it's like I would love to. Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the studio that this was recorded in. You're going to get asked about this on every interview, of course, because it's so legendary. What surprised you about working in 5150 Studios?
Just how comfortable it felt once you're in there. You know, it's such a sacred place, hallowed ground, and you would think it would be sterile. But it is just as they left it. You know, you see the same things, knickknacks around. You know, you go to the kitchen, or it's not even really a kitchen. It's just a side room with a refrigerator and a sink in there, and there's the note, to Alex Van Halen from the Utilities Commission or whatever, you know, just random things sitting around. You're like, wow, it's like being in Eddie Van Halen's closet. You know, you see all this stuff, and it's not like it's not a studio where they clean it out for the next band to come in. You're sitting there and you're living in the space that they were being creative in, and it just makes you step up your game, you know, whether you like it or not. It was, I think that was always in the back of my mind. I know when I was in there, I'm like, there's no goofing around when you're in here. This is
because you guys are big vibe guys. You know, like when we did the thing years ago in the Hendrix Flat, little acoustic session. You know, you guys have played all over the world in front of tens of thousands of people. But when a room's got a good energy, it inspires you, doesn't it? Did you find that was the same thing with 5150?
Yeah, in that room, it's palpable. I mean, you walk in there and it's everywhere. You know, it was, what an opportunity, what an incredibly kind thing that Wolfgang did by offering us, you know, to let us use it to get the process started. Look, I mean, if someone would have told me 40 years ago when I heard Eruption for the first time, you know, and just being so moved by all of that one day I would get to be a part of making music where that human being, you know, created some of his best work. Yeah. It's hard to fathom.
So Wolfgang, was it just a conversation? Did you guys reach out to him to set this up?
Well, we're all very, very close. But I think our manager might have had a discussion with Wolfie, because it's, you know, managers are always looking for angles for a new record. What would be a good inspiring thing to do for the band, and he had come to us and say, you know, we want to do this thing at 5150 Studios. What do you know, or do you guys want to do it at 5150 Studios? And of course, we're like, hell yes, we want to do that. And it was.
Did you write there as well?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Me and Miles will come to the studio for pre-production. You're not necessarily prepared to record a record, but you're prepared to present it to the rest of the band and work out the arrangements. So a lot of stuff, maybe 30% of the record is written there. The rest was written beforehand.
You're not going to tell me that Frankenstein's not on the album somewhere?
It's not.
It's not.
Did you try?
You know, I think each of us have held it at different times and got to just like touch, you know, get the, it's Excalibur, you know, but as far as getting to play it I would personally never.
It would need to be offered, I guess, you know, because then you can't say no. It's like, oh, well,
yeah,
I mean,
if you want,
if you insist.
If you insist, twist my arm.
When you've held it and had, you know, played a couple of notes, what were your impressions of the guitar?
I didn't play any notes. I just.
Yeah, I don't think I played a note. I think it's just holding it and.
It's enough, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that was more than enough, and it was really, once again, I mean. Yeah. I think both of us are kind of sitting here going, even, you know, talking about this on this press run, it's like how did the universe work it out so we had this incredible opportunity? We're grateful, but it really does, as a fan, you know, it's like, wow.
Of course.
It's crazy.
So what gear did make it to the album then? Plenty of PRSs, I'm sure, on there?
Yeah, I was all PRS. My amps were the MT100, the Synergy makes a great.
These guys are just going through the riff, aren't they?
And I used the SLO2 preamp section. And then we incorporated the 5153 that Wolfie was nice enough to lend us. And I came I mean, first time I heard it is when Myles was playing it at pre-production at 5150, and it blew me away. I had the 100 watt version for years, and I've always liked it, but the 5153 50 watt version for some reason spoke to me. So now it's also in my live rig. So it mixes really well with the MT100 and the Synergy.
Awesome, awesome. And yourself?
Yeah, so since when we started the process, when we did pre-production, we didn't want to bring all our gear because cost and whatnot. So I left my Diesels at the warehouse for the time being, and Tim, our manager, was like, you can just use one of the amps there. I was like, cool, that works. And I remember plugging into that 5153 going, wow, this is really works well with my signature guitar. And so what we did then, we started actually tracking my guitars after pre-production, is took my VH4 that I typically record with, or the Herberts, but I've really switched more to the Diezel VH4, and then blended it with the 5153. They once again, they work really well together.
Awesome.
And then for guitar, I'm using my signature.
Of course, that
DRS.
sonically it's just incredible. So much incredible low end on the record as well, which is such a difficult thing to get right. When you go heavy, it can be like so flappy and what have you. What do you think is the key to really having such a heavy sound without it losing that bottom end tightness?
The key is to have Elvis Basquiat mix and record your album. He's a master at that. Elvis just bought a new console, built by Wonder Audio, which is a fantastic company. I had actually beforehand bought a U47 that Wonder Audio made, and I was blown away by it. And to see that he had the board, I was, I think when he got rid of his Neve console and went out to LA, went out to 5150 Studios, we were a little worried because we had done so much on it, but with that new board I think that new board is incredible. Some of our best sounding. The last Tremonti record I did and this new Alter Bridge record I did were probably the two best sounding records I've ever had in my career. And when you first listen to the mix, if you were to isolate any instrument, it sounds like it's so present into the mix that it would drown out everything else. But everything has its own space. Somehow he magically makes it all have its own space and sound bigger than it's ever been. And he's just a master. Just like just like as we love playing guitar and writing songs, Elvis loves getting great tones.
You can trust that you guys are going to do your job and he's going to take care of the rest. And to me, just to touch a little bit on guitar strings, because over the years we've talked an awful lot on the amps and the guitars, and that's very much at the forefront. But a huge part of the sound, that sonic landscape, is coming on the string choices. And you guys are both the Dario artists.
Yes.
Strings are an interesting one because it's like, I don't know, it's almost like a religion, isn't it? You sort of set out early on and then you kind of stick with it, and it's difficult to change.
It's so funny you say it is like that. Once you stick with it.
Yeah, it's like, it's working for me. You don't want to take a risk on a gig or what have you. How did the pair of you end up using the Dario, and what is it about, their strings that are like your go-tos?
I don't know. We've just been using them forever, and I just feel like it's a great. I like their philosophy on things, like they use like sustainable packaging. They've always just kind of been, I don't know, it's just, look, we've been using, once you've been using a product like that for as long as we have, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Just like you said, like with religion, you grow up with it, you stick with it. But there's some things, thank God that the Dario strings are awesome, that I want to continue staying with them.
I think both Mark and I are huge advocates of alternate tunings for that reason. Like if you're trying to create and you're just kind of in a rut, and say you've been using, standard forever and you've just run out of idea, the fretboard, there's nothing fresh. Just changing a few tunings, using something a little crazy that forces you to kind of think outside of your comfort zone, and then suddenly that's an advantage as a guitar player that we have that most instruments you don't have. If you're a trumpet player, you can't really change the valves, No. So that's a big one for both of us.
Alternate tunings are just one of my favorite things to do. When I do guitar clinics, I talk about my songwriting process, and I always challenge somebody to give me a tuning I've never heard of before. I'm starting to running into a bunch of the same ones, but when you pull them up, you just show people how just inspiring they are right out of the gate. You can write music almost immediately with them, and it's going to take you out of your box. I think when you write music, you should be trying to discover something that hasn't been done before, And alternate tunings force that upon you. If you don't know what the guitar is doing anymore, your scales, your chord voicings, everything's different. You tend to find your way back to what you like on a normal tuning, but now your chord voicings are different and your options are different. It just gives you a different view on it all, and I love it.
What's been the most challenging record for you guys to make in your career?
Personally, it would be a toss-up between Blackbird,
Yeah.
and I think to some degree Fortress. And I think that's part of why maybe those are my two favorite of the catalog, because there was just enough, whatever outside forces were, like for example with Blackbird, we didn't even know if we were going to get to make that record, because we did the first record, we then got out of our deal with Wind Up, and then we're trying to figure out where we're going to go next, and we were early enough as a band where we hadn't established enough of a fan base to know whether anyone was going to even care. And so we ended up really betting on ourselves, like literally betting on ourselves, and then we had a lot more time to put that record together, but also a lot more time to second guess everything. It really was a critical point. I don't think just as a band, but just as artists, because we were all at a stage in life where it was like, gosh, what if this doesn't work out? It definitely tested all of us.
And that was the first record Myles played guitar on, and it's funny, I was just thinking when we were talking about this, that the first record you played guitar on has the Blackbird solo, which is our most celebrated solo.
That's true. That was the first lead that I did. It was on Blackbird. I think you may be right. I think
It's the first album. Are there any other leads on that album?
I don't think I don't remember playing any leads. Maybe just all that kind of. During that period, anything I was doing a lot of the soundscapes, and contrary, a lot of the alternate melodies with the guitars over the top of whatever he was doing.
Re-intro licks and stuff.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a Daft Creed question to finish up, because I always do that. The Weathered record, right? The Weathered cover. What's the story behind this cover, Mark? Because it's the original cover. I don't know whether you've seen this, right? But the original cover is this, okay? Now, at some point along the way, your face changes. Only your face changes.
Really?
But also, if you look at Scott really closely, he's shaving with a tiny razor.
Wow. Really? The original artwork for that, there was no faces.
Yeah.
It was, and I think it was way better when there's no faces. I think it was, I don't want to throw Scott under the bus, but Scott was like, yeah, we need to have her be on the front. The image of the band needs to be up there. And it just didn't work out. I think that album cover got like an award for like worst record cover.
And final one. If you're a betting man, I know you won't give me a straight answer, but if you're a betting man, what are the odds that you'll see new Creed music or a UK show?
Well, you never know. We don't have anything planned, but there's been, since we've done so many shows this last year or so with Creed, when you talk to promoters and whatnot, they're like, we need some material for future stuff because you've already played all the shows. So maybe we'll do an interpretive dance that gets people to come to the shows, or some new music, who knows.
Thanks so much, guys. Look, I really appreciate you taking the time. Congratulations on the new album.
Thank you.
Guitar.